So we started the morning better understanding how diverse the Central Coast is, truly this mosaic. And then we spent our last two panels understanding, one, some really interesting models of partnership and collaboration that are delivering results, and then some efforts around trying to streamline the permitting process to get projects done. Now we're shifting into a discussion around funding and really trying to figure out how we can get funding into this region more quickly and consistently over time, and how through organization and coordination that funding can get spent on your priorities. And I want to introduce Lisa Lurie, who I've known for all of 2 hours because we sat together at lunch. Lisa is the executive director of the Santa Cruz RCD, and she'll lead us through this next stage of the conversation.
All right, there we are. Thank you so much, Secretary Crowfoot, for the introduction. Again, I'm Lisa Lurie with the Resource Conservation District of Santa Cruz County, and I am really thrilled to have you all here with us in Santa Cruz and to be a part of this community, a part of our collective efforts to be really meeting the needs of our landscapes and of our broader communities. So on our panel here to talk about moving toward a regional investment strategy, I have with me Robin Bellows, of the Forest Health Program Manager for CAL FIRE, who oversees forest health grants, regional pilots, and tribal resilience grants. I have Brian Newman-Lindsay, the Program Manager at the Department of Conservation, who oversees the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program. Then Chris Zimney, State Forester for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Sherry Hazelhurst, Director of State and Private Forestry for Region 5 of the U.S. Forest Service. And Valentin Lopez, the Chairman of the Amamutsan Tribal Band and President of the Amamutsan Land Trust. So in reflecting on the presentations that we've heard from today, really the panelists have set the stage in talking about the diversity of ecology we have here on the Central Coast, this management of the mosaic that we're operating under, the intensity of the risks and needs for our WUI areas. We heard about the importance of Indigenous land stewardship on this landscape. And that really, there is no single model for success in terms of what collaboration looks like, that there are real diverse models from formalized JPAs, informal networks, prescribed burn associations, and everything in between. We've also heard messages about some of the ongoing challenges, specifically how do we sustain this work over the long term? And how do we make this shift from the way that we view the work and the way that we view the funding of the work from a project by project kind of discrete action approach to a mindset that is more programmatic and holistic, that really requires a systematic change towards supporting sustained land stewardship. So on this panel, we'll be discussing the challenges and the opportunities for supporting diverse models of collaboration, for addressing locally identified regional priorities, and supporting the broad networks of community members who are engaged in that work. So we'll start off with Brian Newman-Lindsay from DOC, who's gonna really set the table for us in talking about how the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program is building the capacity and the frameworks for regional investments. From there, we'll hear from our panelists representing a tribal perspective as well as state and federal programs. And we really wanna have an open discussion on how are we aligning our efforts to support local priorities and diverse models of collaboration? What are the constraints that we're experiencing? And how can we continue to evolve our ways of working to improve integration and create even greater enabling conditions for locally led solutions? We really want to build on the strong foundation of the task force and the many regional collaboratives that we've heard from today to achieve those broader goals. So with that, I will hand it over to Brian to help set the stage for us.
Thank you. So 30 years ago, I was with my mom in the Oakland Hills firestorm. My grandparents were on Highway 24 driving through the tunnel, and embers were raining down on them. So it's scary. Today, when my mom is worried about fire, I get to tell her about all the incredible people that we work with who are solving this problem and like making California a livable place. That means a lot to me. So we are making incredible progress. I really believe that. I have to say, yesterday we got to execute an agreement with Indigenous Stewardship Network to support their work for Indigenous leadership around the state. We're also seeing incredible work mobilizing, empowering people and organizations across the state. We're seeing people knock down strategic barriers in workforce development, in prescribed fire, beneficial fire, all these task areas, and we're seeing good projects on the ground, right? But when we do talk about 1 million acres in a year, and then the year after that, the year after that, right? We need to be very sober, because I think we should really acknowledge that our tools are not there yet. So Secretary Crowfoot took my talking points, but that's okay. So why? I think that, oh, excellent, there's some slides. Why? So sustained funding, right? That's the answer, it's always the answer. But to complicate that, our programs are still really siloed. We have these good programs, but they have really focused objectives. They're constrained by statutes, they're constrained by the regulatory authorities, and they're constrained by culture and policy. So no matter, in all these places where we have these incredibly complicated projects, no one set of investments is actually capable of solving the problems in that place and meeting the needs of that place. So then what happens? Like, really effective people piece together grants, and you end up with these partners. I think I'm on the next slide, actually. But you piece together partners who, now they have 6 grants, and now they spend their entire time on grant management. They're either applying to new grants, or they're reporting to our existing grants. And then this funding is also incremental. So it's inconsistent, it comes and it goes. People get funding for one project, or they don't, or it's competitive, and they start to build something, and then it falls apart. So I really think what we've seen through this work over the past 2 years, 5 years, is that we can't just think about projects, about turning dollars into treatments. We need to build an infrastructure of stewardship in every fire-prone location in the state, right? We have 22 million acres that needs protection, they need commitment. And so we don't have those tools yet, so we need to build them. In the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program, we're trying to work on that. We're working with the task force on that. And we're starting to see some results. And so we're going to talk about what we think we're accomplishing and where we think it can go. And so where that starts for us, on the next slide, is with governance. So this starts in the same place where we've talked a lot today about collaboration and about local needs. So this is a graph from OneTAM and the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority about how they are organized. I don't think anybody should really try to read it today, but this is just one model, right? And we heard from our other partners as well earlier today about how they're organized. And so what I see us doing in our program is meeting people where they're at. So we ask regions to self-organize, and then we hold them to that. So we can have standards, the state can have standards, the Fed can have standards, and we can be a partner in these projects. We have to mean it when we tell them that they're going to self-organize, right? I think Dylan earlier today said the collaboration has to bear weight, which I really liked. But then we need to reciprocate, right? We need to work with them. Once you have these partners at the table, I think the collaboration actually does resolve barriers. In addition to getting more resources mobilized, it removes conflict. So you see places where previously groups that were fighting over what should happen have, once you actually get down to where there's common ground, now they're working together and it accelerates much faster. So next slide. Once you have those partners, you can start talking about priorities. You can start talking about shared vision and building projects. So we see our partners all down the coast collecting really advanced data, and then using that along with local knowledge, new science, traditional ecological knowledge to put together priorities and say, what does this landscape need? So this was one of, I think, a dozen different assessments of one location in one of our regions, where they tried to answer the question as a collaborative, what does this place need, right? What does it mean to have a living place here? And there's a lot of benefits, right? We heard about this too, I think. When you front load planning, when you give people the green light to pursue their own priorities, and to plan toward that, it removes some of those unknowns, like Len was talking about. You get more efficiency, you get more transparency, and you get more public trust. So that's where we see people start carrying this. And then the next slide, once you have partners, and you have information, you have plans, or you have projects, you can start building plans. And so for us, this isn't just a list of projects, and it's not just like a sweeping strategy document that makes broad gestures and then doesn't accomplish anything. These are integrated plans that are built off that foundation of collaboration, governance, and data and decision-making, so that the plans are built with the idea of stewardship in them. The idea that it's projects now, it's projects in 2 years, it's projects in 5 years. So that 1 year time frame, that 2 year time frame to get a project ready isn't a barrier because the same people are organized and they can count on that work, right? So I think the key for us is that our regional partners are able to build forward and build off of their plans. And our funding agencies, our statewide partners, are able to see their priorities reflected in those plans. It's transparent. They know what it is. They know what they're getting into. So they can say, we are a water agency. We can see that water is represented in this plan and how we can contribute. It's not a question mark, right? We can see biodiversity in this plan, even if it has a strong wildfire focus or wildfire prevention focus. And so we're not gonna replace all our existing competitive programs or all like the good work we're doing or high-performing projects. But if we can invest in this model, we can build this stable core who can be a backbone of the work. And so that's what we're trying to do. We don't know how to do that yet. So this is, I think, the task that we've been asked to do. Throughout the Central Coast region, we've just also awarded yesterday $11 million to the State Coastal Conservancy to amplify the work they've already done with these partners, to build and ensure that there's effective regional priority plans in all 7 of the planning areas that you're seeing here, and also investing in like key strategic areas where they're seeing major needs. So the first of these plans, I think, are ready. They're ready to go. They want to be funded now. They're ready to do this job. And then there's more down the road. So what is incumbent on us, I think, is to figure out how to actually meet them where they're at, how to take those plans and accept them, and then fund them and make sure that we can ensure that that work occurs. I'm excited to hear what everybody else's ideas are.
That's great. Thank you for that overview. And what I really appreciate in that framing is that while the plans are important, it is the process and the infrastructure that comes with those plans. You know, what you described as the infrastructure of stewardship, I think that gives us a real tangible visual of the thing that we all know is needed and is so hard to resource, frankly. With a lot of funding focused on projects, the RFFCP program is really unique in that focus on the infrastructure. Chairman Lopez, I'd like to turn to you, and as we heard from Brian, part of the state's responsibility in this regional kind of framework is entrusting and sharing governance with local partners. And as he mentioned, it has to be reciprocal with a commitment to shared decision-making. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how can state and federal programs best support your needs and values and be accountable to you.
Thank you very much. When we started our land trust, well, actually we started about 6 years before that doing research with Berkeley, with state parks and other partners and stuff like that. The hardest thing for us was trust. And that still remains a big issue for us, you know. When we work with partners and stuff like that, you know, after the history that we experienced and everything else, we're very careful. Who the heck do we, how can we trust them and stuff like that? Today, the only people that we really work with are people in the land conservation environment issues. You know, our creation story tells us that we have the responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. And we think the people here today, they have that same belief, and they want to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. And that's why we're here today. That's why we work together with you. Not everyone, at least not everyone yet. But we do work with people in the environment organization, but we don't work with other organizations outside the environment. The trust level still has not been built. And even though we work with them, a lot of times we feel that they have the same goals and the same quest that we do, but in many cases, they don't know what the heck they're doing. And that's where we come on in with our indigenous knowledge. And we're trying to do that. We do a lot of, I'm going to just talk for a couple minutes and then I'll kind of get to the point. Maybe. We started working with the research and stuff like that, and it was difficult at first because, we did not want our lands to be, torn up and stuff like that by archaeologists. But little by little, we started finding about how much knowledge and how much that we can learn and benefit from that knowledge and stuff like that. And so we started doing a lot of work with the archaeologists. And then, and then as we were doing that work, as a tribe, we recognized that what we need to do is work to restore that environment, that, the landscapes that were here prior to first contact. We also learned that we called it research, what the archaeologists and stuff were doing at first, but today we don't call it research, we call it validation. They're validating the way that our people took care of the native plants is important. Our native plants are very resistant to fire, to drought, to flooding, etc. The use of fire. Fire is going to be really critical if we're going to survive and deal with climate change and restore landscapes and prevent the catastrophic fires. So that, so a lot of that was just restoring what we have here. Those early explorers, when they came down the coast here, what they saw was the whole central coast of California was a coastal prairie, and it is recognized as one of the most biodiverse landscapes in California. And it's our goal to get that back. And our approach to it, and this is important because when we look at funding, the way that we approach it is much different than other organizations. First we want to, we collect the seeds of the native plants that were there and in that proximity. And then we do research on the insects and the birds and other species that are there prior to the burn. And then we do the cultural burn. And then we want to do restoration. We have an aggressive seed propagation program. Last year was our first year. We did 120,000 plants. This year we're trying to do much more than that. And so far this year we have 139,000 plants that we propagated to restore, to return to the landscapes. And then we do ongoing research periodically going forward so we can talk about the impacts of it. And so if we get money for burns, it doesn't cover the restoration of the native plants. It doesn't cover the research. It doesn't cover the seed collections. And so that's a big challenge for us regarding, regarding funding. And the other thing is that our tribe, we look at our plants, as I said this morning, as our relatives. Well, we don't want to go out, and plant, 1,000 new trees, or 1,000 new plants that are our relatives, knowing 5 or 10 years from now, or even next year, that budget dries up, those plants are going to die. I mean, that's like putting your relatives there knowing they're going to die. That's a different mental approach to this right here. And that concerns us too. I mean, how in the world would anyone do that? And, and that's hard for us to understand. So when we talk about funding, that sustainable funding is really, really important. A lot of our native plants, they don't need water. You don't have to irrigate them and stuff like that. So, they'll do okay after that second year of growth. They'll do okay, but without fire, if we work to clear the landscapes and then restore the native plants, and then we stop, and then the funding stops, so we're not able to take care of those plants anymore, and then the fire returns. What will happen is that coastal prairie will disappear. First it come the shrubs, then the Doug fir, and then the redwoods, and it'll be gone, just like it is now. So that's a big concern for us. You know, and we this morning I said we have a lot of partners that, you know, that we've created a lot of MOUs and such like that, you know, state parks, BLM and stuff like that. And they work with us, and we're very proud and glad for that. But these are things that are always on our mind that we think about. You know, there's a lot of opportunity because of our partners here, and we're being invited to participate and become active. Because we're just restoring our knowledge, we have to go at our pace. You know, a lot of agencies says, well, why don't you come out here and do this right here, you know, and we get a lot of invites. But we have to go at our pace. And so when you work with tribes, that's important to understand, that you must go at their pace. You can't go at the pace of that they want to go at. And so I heard this morning you want to go fast, and I respect that, I appreciate that, you know. And you know, and we can, you know, and we can build to go fast, you know. But if you're asking us tomorrow to go fast, that's going to be, you know, difficult, if not impossible for us. That's another consideration for the people with the funding, is expecting us to go fast, you know, and stuff and such. So, but there's a reason to not, you know, to understand our tribe, what we're trying to create with the benefits of cultural burning. You know, I made a list here, and this list here could be expanded 3 or 4 times. When you have the cultural burns, you're reducing the fuel loads, and you're reducing, you know, the threat of fire. You're increasing the water quality. A cultural burn will increase the quality of water. Low intensity fires, they don't get hot, they creep along the ground, and they won't start the trees on fire, or at times even a lot of much less of a threat to housing and stuff like that. You know, and they help eliminate the non-native plants, because a lot of non-native plants are not fire resistant. So by doing this, you're doing that, and you're increasing the native plants. Whenever that smoke is going through, like an oak wood forest and stuff like that, the smoke goes up, and it's actually smudging a tree. We see it as ceremony, the way we smudge ourselves before ceremony. That smoke going up in those trees right there, it is actually smudging and blessing and cleansing and purifying those trees. And then it also has the effect of the smoke went into the trees, and it chokes out the bugs, and the bugs drop, and they'll burn. So it's really, you know, cleans the trees. And so now whenever we go collect acorn, they're very clean. You know, you can have 90% no bugs and stuff like that. So those are a lot of the challenges, and you know, the opportunities are there, and we're ready to act on them. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Lopez. You really presented some powerful examples of broad thinking around benefits, and how do we kind of wrap our arms around and really support broad cultural benefits within this work and these programs. And I appreciate your point on pace and seeking alignment there. Turning to our federal partners, and Chris, maybe if you could start us off. Could you share with us what you and the NRCS are bringing to the table in support of regional investments, in support of these local priorities? And more specifically, can you share an example or two of how you and your agency are doing your work differently, or formulating your programs differently as a result of this thinking around regional investments?
No, fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. You know, and thank you for having me here too, and glad to talk about NRCS. And I've been around doing this forestry stuff for 45 years in California, and I wasn't sure who NRCS was either when I got hired by them. But NRCS is the Natural Resource Conservation Service. They are a federal agency under the Department of Agriculture. They're the old soil survey from the Dust Bowl days is when they were formed. But what we do is we provide technical and financial assistance to private landowners, ag, rangeland, and forestry. non-industrial private forestry. And so we're in a unique opportunity to help these regional partnerships by the technical assistance and having partners be funded by us. And we're also in a position to provide financial assistance, meaning the work done by a particular landowner through one of our programs or through a partner to get the work done on the ground. So I think we have a great place to be in these regional frameworks. And I can tell you, as being the co-chair of the private landowner work group of the governor's task force, the regional investment strategy is one of our primary action items that we're recommending to the governor. And to me, the regional partnership is defined as literally a regional partner developing locally planned priority projects and multiple agencies, perhaps even private partners, providing the funding to implement that project. It completely expands us as an agency, not only relying on our staff to contribute to the wildfire resilience, but now we get to scale and now we get to pace because we're doubling our workforce and we're focusing on a locally planned area. So I really think that's the power of the regional investment strategy. And NRCS, we're getting there, I'd say. I'd give us a B, Chairman, about where we are with these regional frameworks. We certainly issue large grants to partners. For example, we just issued a regional conservation planning partnership to just in Sonoma County to North Bay Rebuild, and CAL FIRE has a large grant with them, and National Fish and Wildlife Foundation has a large grant in the Sonoma County in these priority areas overseen by this regional partner, North Bay, Rebuild North Bay. So we're in the game of going to the local partner and getting multiple agency funding sources heading there. One other example that we're doing is that since we provide technical assistance, we provide technical assistance money to partners to help NRCS programs get done, but also help out Region 5 projects or to help out CAL FIRE funded projects. And so we have had a long-standing agreement with CARCD where we fund them to their local RCDs, and right here in the mid-coast here, we have given funding to RCD of Monterey County and to Santa Cruz County RCD to work on a Joint Chiefs project. Well, what's a Joint Chiefs project? It's a NRCS and Forest Service funded project where a coordinated state and federal and land and private land work is done, and really successful results. We've been working in the kind of in the San Lucia Preserve area, in the Middledorf area, and in the Palo Colorado fire there off of Big Sur. And it's making progress. They're at the table. We're servicing public and private land, and I think it's a good example of moving forward.
Thank you, Chris. Sherry, would you like to share with us a bit from the perspective of the U.S. Forest Service in terms of what you're bringing to the table and how are you doing work differently?
So in the Central Coast, we may seem like a small piece of that landscape. As you saw some of the maps earlier, the National Forest System is the Los Padres National Forest, and it's the only national forest in this area. However, we also have a part of our organization, State and Private Forestry, with a multitude of programs, including cooperative fire and landowner assistance programs that provide many different types of support. So on the National Forest System side, statewide, we have 7 landscapes that we're addressing through the Wildfire Crisis Strategy. And those, in addition to the regular funding that they get for their programs, there's an additional $500 million coming to those landscapes this year alone. Beyond that, as Chris mentioned, we've got the Joint Chiefs projects that we work on with NRCS colleagues. And then we have the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration projects. So our agency's been working on large-scale projects for a very long time, and it may just have a different name depending on when it originated. And we're continuing that theme with these wildfire crisis strategy landscapes. On the state and private side, we have a number of grant programs. So most recently, you've heard about, I think our regional forester Eberline announced last meeting that we awarded $100 million to California in the Community Wildfire Defense Grants Program. So that's huge for us, and congratulations to all of you. And as she mentioned this morning, there's going to be another round coming up. So there's more opportunities, especially for this part of the state, because this one didn't get quite as much as in the last round. So I hope you all think about that and start developing your projects. We also had the urban and community forestry grants, and CAL FIRE is a fantastic partner in that. And they double and triple and quadruple our money often. So the $43 million that'll go to that can also help support activities here in the urban and community forest arenas. Some examples of what our agency is doing to increase how much we can do and with the partners. As part of that wildfire crisis strategy, we are embarking on some keystone agreements with national level NGO organizations. All of the ones that we have so far, and I think there's about 8 of them, all do work in California, and you've heard of their names before, National Forest Foundation being one of our key partners. So we hope to expand on those and increase the tribal collaboration in that effort with more tribal keystone agreements, and we're looking forward to that. And then we're working with partners in new ways. We want to bring new partners to the table. So there's lots of incentive programs for those organizations we haven't worked with in the past. So we look forward to hearing from all of you. If you're a new partner who would like to work with us, we can help you find the doorways to our programs.
Yeah. And Robin, what would you like to share from the perspective of CAL FIRE?
Hi. I heard that the challenge of the day is to talk about how we're thinking beyond marginal change and onto big solutions, so I'm going to try to come back to that. I've been at CAL FIRE for almost 4 years, and CAL FIRE grants have come a long way in the past few years. So I want to recognize how much work is being done under the existing program as we try to step up. There's many expanded programs and many new programs, and some of those do have a focus on planning, capacity building, paying for Cal VTPs, stuff like that. Some that come to mind are the Wildfire Resilience Block Grants, business wood products and workforce development grants, and tribal wildfire resilience grants. So generally, these are projects that are designed and proposed at local or regional levels. And the scoring criteria for these decisions can include regional prioritization and community support. So one thing that Forest Health Program has been doing is considering how we can effectively consider the regional prioritization when we're making these award decisions. For some specific successes, there were 2 years of wildfire resilience block grants. One of these was to the California Association of RCDs, through which 4 of the local RCDs in the Central Coast were able to provide technical assistance to private landowners and help develop forest management plans, burn plans, and project design, and also working with the Forest Service on shared stewardship advisors to incubate and elevate projects that are really solid, good quality, effective projects. Finally, Forest Health Program has 3 pilot regional investments that are trying to work on this issue specifically. Each of them has a different approach to how regional prioritization and regional development can happen. The goal of those is to support regional capacity building, regional partnerships, and regional prioritization, and also to bring funds to small projects and organizations that would not otherwise have access to this. Our goal is to learn from these 3 pilot projects prior to investing in other regional investments, because we want to be able to scale these up in a way that's effective and ensure that regional investments contribute to successful work on the ground.
More to come there. Excited to see. And we talked a lot throughout the day about different challenges, not only around funding, but just in kind of making a cultural shift within each of our organizations, each of our agencies to working in a truly integrated way. And I'm interested in hearing from each of our state and federal partners here about what challenges remain. What do you see as those present challenges to achieving truly integrated regional investments, bringing all these great examples together in a cohesive way, and also I think about integration outside of the direct forest and fire-related funding, but how are we integrating with broader wildlife agencies, right? And thinking about the task force as a real enabling framework for that. So what are the challenges that remain to achieve that integration at the scale that's needed to meet the needs on the land and sustain this work for generations, right? That sustained point has come up a lot. Can you articulate what you see as those key challenges? And if you have an example of how you've seen progress being made towards addressing those challenges.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks, Lisa. These regional investment frameworks with a regional partner and multiple agencies, Forest Service, CAL FIRE, NRCS, my colleague Corinne Francis, BLM, is here. I wish we were all, rowing in the same direction sometimes. We have money. We have money like we've never seen before now for this type of work. And so how do we get to the partner and then flood that partner with the money from all agencies? We have our silos still, right? You're applying here with your criteria and maybe you're in the other end of the county. So finding the coordination amongst our agencies for the regional partner. But the regional partner too, sometimes we have trouble finding a regional partner. They're staffing up too. They're regional forest and fire capacity grantees like North Coast Regional Partnership and Sierra Nevada Conservancy. I would love to be able to give a regional partner some funding, not me, but our agency. And but they're busy too. They have a lot of CAL FIRE grants. The forester positions are, they're just not out there sometimes. So we're flying all kinds of civil service positions, but in terms of the partner, finding them to be able to get staff, not only forestry, but the environmental consultants and get access to contractors are all things that I think we have a barrier on and quite a bit of ways to go. But I do want to talk about one successful way of overcoming these barriers that we've seen. And this was that came out of the governor's Wildfire Resilience Task Force. And that was an action item called Emergency Forest Restoration Teams. We just gave it a name. But it's fundamentally a partner who receives multiple agency funding, NRCS, CAL FIRE, and generous amounts from the Forest Service to focus on rapid restoration of post-fire non-industrial private forest land. And we had a couple ongoing pilot projects right now that is actually doing this. And one is in the Caldor Fire with El Dorado County RCD. And one is in the Feather River RCD in the Dixie Fire. And it is unbelievable when you have a focused partner who is doing the planning and the agencies bring in significant funding to get that work done. So I really think there is something to this regional partner, multiple agency focused on a locally planned project. Because when it's there, it builds stability. It keeps people in place and employed and not just ending. And that is another one of these barriers that we've talked about today is what happens when the grant money stops. As a federal employee, a lot of my life, it comes and it goes, and it starts and it stops. And while we are really in an unbelievable situation right now, nothing like I've never seen in my 45-year career in California doing this, I think we have some great opportunities to really execute these regional strategies.
And Sherry, what do you see as the challenges in front of us? And do you have an example or two of success that you've seen in working towards addressing those challenges?
Well, I think when Secretary Crowfoot brought up how do we do more and how do we get this done faster, I think that's one of our biggest challenges at the moment. So the effectiveness of collaborative groups, we've seen over and over again that if you've got good collaboration, you're already steps ahead and we can program funding that's on the table that comes about maybe unexpectedly, these windfalls, like Chris was talking about, we can move that really quickly. So that's one way to get at some successes. I think it's figuring out ways to take advantage of the funds when it does come up and being smart with those investments. How can we stage our projects over time? How can we have partners in place being ready to take on different parts of the project to meet different obligations or opportunities with the money? I think one of the examples that from our landscapes that started a year ago, the Tahoe and Stanislaus National Forests, they used a lot of the tools that you saw mentioned earlier today in talking with partners to create priorities, to stage out their projects over a span of 10 years with some funding associated with that to get moving on the breadth of work that needs to take place. Understanding that we don't and can't treat every single acre out there. So where do we go first and how do we progress through those? I think examples of Tuolumne County was successful in getting $10 million through that community wildfire defense grants to be able to do the work on the state and private lands that are adjacent. So while we can't always choose from the national level where the funding is going to go, we can certainly try and match up with it wherever we can to get more acres done and be synergistic on that landscape.
And Robin, what are the challenges, most pressing challenges that you see, and how has CAL FIRE shown some success in partnerships and in addressing those challenges?
So there's some challenges we all face. We need more places to take the wood out of the woods. That's a bottleneck. We need more people to do that work and to move from just lots of public funding to sustainable regional wood products industries. There's some challenges that have come up in particular as I work on the regional forest health pilot grants. So one of those is that the legislature determines the lifetime of the funding, and the funding authority sets the criteria on how those funds can be used. So that means that we often have to know up front exactly what and where the work is going to be. So when we're talking about how to achieve regional investment with the current strategy, the success story here is what Brian called sequenced programs of work, or multi-phase projects where a region can say, here is what we have now, let's get this funded, let's include some planning, and then come back when we're ready to do the next one. Last challenge is that I think there's a communication gap between the folks who have funding available and the folks who have regional priorities. Sometimes the funders don't know what the regional priorities are because there's so many regions statewide. I made a little drawing here. It's like the elementary school, like match the word with the definition and you have to connect the thing. And I think there's opportunities for like to make the current system work for regional investments, to opportunity to make regional priority plans and regional resource kits. That's a success to like help connect some of the dots so that we can, so that we can make these happen and figure out how to do it.
That's great. And one thing we were kind of chatting about over lunch was thinking about if the local partners are responsible for doing that coordination, identifying shared priorities, and advancing these portfolios of projects, and advancing a clear vision of the supplemental capacity that's needed to make that happen. Is there a role for the task force? And part of the underlying foundation of the task force is really creating this forum of funders, right, to come together. We bring forward the priorities, and is there a portfolio of funding that can be created to help kind of do that connecting of the dots and help create some more efficiencies there? What opportunities might we have? Yeah.
And so on that note, I just want to note that we've been asked this question. Our first regional priority plans have been published, and then people said, okay, so now what? Okay, so now what? And so the task force has asked us in the Regional Frameworks Work Group to try to answer that question with these regional investment strategies. So Forrest and I and others are going to be reaching out in the regions to try to answer that question. So when these plans become ready, when people say we have work for us, that we actually have a forum to take them to have that like very structured conversation about what is possible. So I'm excited about that. I think we don't know the
Yeah.
pieces there yet.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to figure out. But if I'm going to add one challenge, I think also we love the word collaboration today and partnership. We've said it probably 700 times. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of communication, and it's very possible to have too much communication or that it just turns into noise. So we do need to think about, and people get overwhelmed all the time. We do need to just think about coordination. I like thinking about what Robin said. It's like, what does it take to go from collaboration or communication to coordination? Yeah, I don't have the answer.
This is maybe more of a comment than a question, but I do want to thank each of you, because this is, for those of you listening, I know most of you know this is a big fundamental change in funding. I mean, I've been around, unfortunately, long enough to know that the way California funds natural resources projects is, because it's been mostly bond money, it's monies only for individual shovel-ready projects. That's what we've been doing for 30 years, funding individual shovel-ready projects that are usually single agency, single purpose projects. And to make that shift to sequence programs of work or portfolios of projects is challenging. And it's asking each of our agencies to think a little bit differently about how they fund projects, with the expectation, as Wade said, that's the only way we're going to get there. We're not going to get to 1 million acres, one project at a time. We've got to fund bundles of projects, portfolios of projects, sequences of projects, but it shifts the accountability from being sure that that project is worthy of funding. Then that organization can handle the money, that can process the money, that has the workforce, that has the reporting mechanism, so that you can assure us in the administration and the legislature and Congress that if you do what the Forest Service is doing, which is giving areas tens of millions of dollars each, that money is actually going to be spent fast and on the ground, isn't going to sit there. So it does change, it does take a fundamental shift, and that's why they're all calling these pilots, because they're trying to figure out how to change their guidelines to sort of accommodate these big block grants that we know you want. But we also have to be concerned about the fact that it needs to be spent fast, and you need to be accountable to report back. And so every agency has its own way of trying to do that. And as a task force, we're going to keep coming back to each meeting to do better and better at that. The last meeting, you saw 3 or 4 block grants going to Southern California. They do have priority plans that are coming together. So each region is at somewhat of a different stage on this. But we've heard from all of you. You have workforce. The best way to deal with workforce, the best way to deal with sustained funding is block grants for larger periods of time. We know that. We've heard you. But it's going to take a while. It's going to take some pilots for us to work out how to do that in a way that provides also the level of accountability we need and the assurance that that money is going to hit the ground fast. Because otherwise it's too easy just to say, wait a minute, we got these shovel-ready individual projects over here, let's just get them done. Let's not fund this collaborative effort because it's going to take them a few years to get the money out the door. So those are just some of the trade-offs that we're struggling with, but I want to assure you that we know that's the wave of the future. It's also not easy given our annual budget process. So I don't want to hide the challenge. I guess that's what I'm saying. It's going to be challenging, but I think we're convinced that we've got to go in that direction if we're going to get to scale. So again, thank you all for leading the way, and Brian especially. The RFSC program is really the first time in state government that an agency's had the amount of money it's had for capacity building and planning. And I think they're making the most of it by trying to, as he said, develop a network that we can build upon in the future. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I'll just reinforce a bunch of points. The first thing I say is our elected officials have really stepped up. Our governor, our legislature have allocated almost $3 billion, as I said this morning, to the work that we're talking about today. That is like a quantum leap, like a 15x increase in funding from past years. Our federal leaders, current President Biden's administration, as well as Congress, ended a historic practice of bleeding the resilience budgets every year to fight fires, which was called fire borrowing, and then putting in what is a generational set of investments. Chris, I think you had it. It's a little bit mind-numbing to see all those zeros. And that's an incredible opportunity. Then I think the onus is on us as the implementing agencies around how do we put that money to work quickly and effectively and durably. I think we need those all. I agree with Patrick, Brian, that this RFFC program is a game changer because we're investing in capacity. And I loved your slide with the critiques on the current sort of project by project, and then what we're going for, which is really building networks across regions that can create this sustainable pipeline of work moving forward. And then Rob, I just commend CAL FIRE. You guys are kicking butt in terms of getting funding out the door. I mean, I'm amazed when I see these funding announcements. It used to be $7 million here, $14 million. Now it's $140 million, $220 million. You guys are working hard to get money out the door. And I also appreciate that you really listen to regions and you're trying to figure out this, block grant strategy. And I'm with Patrick. There's a lot of institutional constraints that make that difficult. And I think as you implement those pilots and learn and refine, one thing we can do as agency leaders, but then I would argue even as lawmakers, is figure out, are there ways to modify or lessen those constraints so we can do more of this. And then the last thing I'll say is this is a challenge to the regions because this is somewhat of a leap of faith. There is some risk to whether it's policymakers or agencies in Sacramento or Washington, D.C., devolving decision-making to the regions. And here we think it's necessary and we think it's appropriate, but our success in shifting to this model that Patrick talks about relies on the effectiveness of this regional planning and coordination. So I think we're sort of building a new plane while flying it, and the more that you all can take this moment of opportunity that we have and really hit it out of the park in terms of coming together and identify and showing us how this regional approach can work could be the catalyst for a paradigm shift that I feel like we need for decades to come. So it's an incredible moment of opportunity, but also responsibility.
And I'll just add too, thanks Wade, agree obviously with everything, we're moving forward on that. But again, the more success breeds success, folks too. So if we all working together, investing, planning, coordinating, using your term, collaborating as well, we're going to be a good investment. And whether it's state government, whether it's local, whether it's philanthropic groups, federal government, if we can show that great on the ground work, that we're reducing risk, we're creating resilient landscapes, we are great investment. And that's going to breed more investment in us. So that's what this is about too. We absolutely need to take care of the risk we have right now, but also this is a big pay it forward into the future. So if we can continue to work, like Patrick said and Wade, we're learning every time. That's what's so exciting about these meetings for me is we are constantly building on it, learning better, making it better every time. So that's what is exciting about this too, is that you can just see the success building and that will be great investments for the American public. Thanks.